Welcome to Mindful Mountain Wellness and our Education and Training Center Mindful Mountain Institute. My name is Anna Hallows. I am the founder of Mindful Mountain Wellness. Today's podcast will be about learning to set healthy boundaries. This is episode 5, Finding Fulfillment, Visualizing, and Setting Clear Boundaries. This is an interactive course, so make sure you have a journal and a quiet, peaceful place to practice mindfully. You will be asked to pause to complete the mindfulness and journaling exercise throughout the course. So, finding fulfillment, visualizing, and setting clear boundaries. This lesson will solidify your ability to define your boundaries, to learn to be clear in what your wants and needs are as you're setting your boundary, and to gain an ability to visualize exactly how this boundary is going to look in order to know how to set a clear boundary. So first, acknowledge the way that you normally set boundaries. Are you satisfied with the way you set boundaries? Are there times that are easier, certain situations that are a little bit easier to set boundaries? What are some more difficult situations where you need to set a boundary? How do you set boundaries in those more difficult situations? What thoughts, feelings, and emotions come up when you need to set a boundary in a more difficult situation? So by visualizing in as much detail as you possibly can what this boundary looks like, visualizing yourself saying the boundary in words until you feel confident and comfortable establishing this boundary and being okay with how others respond. The important concept is that you established this boundary. You set this boundary. Once you've established and set a boundary, how other people respond, that's you still need to maintain that boundary once it's set. So as you're envisioning what your boundary will look like and you're practicing in the more difficult situation, what if that boundary is not accepted? What do you do when you've established a boundary and that boundary is not accepted? So think about how you will respond and how you will maintain that boundary. Today's mindfulness exercise, so go ahead and take a moment to check in with your posture and your breath. Find a comfortable seated position. If you're in nature, go ahead and get yourself comfortable, seated, quieting your mind. As you're quieting your mind, listening to your breath, noticing your posture, feeling your feet rooted into the earth, ask yourself, in my life, the current boundaries I am able to establish and keep in place are, and think about those boundaries that you have established, set in place, ones that you're comfortable with, these boundaries that create confidence. Notice how you're feeling emotionally, any emotions that become present, any thoughts, any feelings. And then ask yourself, how do I apply these boundaries successfully? So what gives me success in establishing these boundaries? As you're visualizing yourself setting these boundaries that you already have in place, the boundaries that you're confident and comfortable creating, with that confidence and security in your ability to establish a boundary, visualize a boundary that you need to establish. And imagine yourself saying the words in as much detail as possible to set this boundary. If you feel distracted or nervous, listen to your breath to bring your mind to center. Then continue to visualize the words you will use to clearly and calmly set this boundary. Continue this practice in your mind until you are ready to practice boundary setting in real life. So if you can continue to visualize the boundary you need to set in place, maybe start with an easier situation and then gradually move to a more difficult situation. Once you find that confidence and security in the words that you need to use in setting the boundary and imagining what reactions, what your body, mind, spirit, what emotions and feelings come up for you, and how do you respond in order to still maintain that solid boundary. So go ahead and put the podcast on pause. Excuse me. Practicing this mindfulness exercise. When you feel distracted, continue to go back to your breath. Today's journal prompt. So how can you use boundaries to be the best person that you can be? How do you use boundaries to gain confidence and security in your life? So think of 3 ways boundaries can help you build and define your character. This includes physical boundaries and functional boundaries. What is the character that you want to have for yourself? Who do you want to be? In as much detail as you can, write about how boundaries define your character. Go ahead and put the podcast on pause to complete this journal prompt. Real-world experience. This week, visualizing a boundary that you wish you had set in place. When you are ready, clearly set and maintain this boundary. Notice how you feel and emotions that become present, any thoughts that surface, how you physically feel in your body. Notice and observe. Notice how you react when this boundary that you have set is not received the way that you would have liked it to. How do you maintain your ground even though others may not accept the boundary you have set? Practice communicating the boundary setting skills until you are able to calmly set a boundary and be okay with how others react to your boundary while holding your ground. So this week, continue this mindfulness exercise, continuing to visualize in as much detail as possible how you will set boundaries using words, being aware of any emotions, thoughts, or feelings that become present, noticing how you respond, and noticing how you feel when others respond to the boundary you have set in place. Continue this journal exercise, expanding on your thoughts about how you want to define your character. What boundaries do you need to have set in place to define the character of who you want to become, who you want to be, how you want to establish your role and your identity? And continue this real-world experience of practicing setting boundaries even when in difficult situations, and noticing how you feel when others do not receive the boundary the way that you would like to. And notice how you're able to stand your ground. And I will see you next week for episode 6. Thank you for joining me for this Learning to Set Healthy Boundaries podcast.